Somewhere on the seafloor right now, a flatfish is swimming past a sea snake. Except it is not a sea snake, and it is not a flatfish either. It is one single animal, pretending to be both, at the same time, to save its own life. Can an octopus really impersonate any animal in the ocean? Let's set the rules first. We are not talking about simple camouflage, blending into rocks or coral the way a chameleon blends into a branch. We are talking about active impersonation, an animal studying its predators, then physically performing another creature's shape, color, and movement, convincingly enough to fool the very thing trying to eat it. If that sounds unbelievable, that is because for most of scientific history, nobody believed it either. Let's find out how far this shape-shifting act actually goes. Start with the basics. Octopuses already have one of the most extreme disguise systems in the animal kingdom. Their skin is packed with tens of thousands of tiny pigment sacs called chromatophores, each one controlled directly by the nervous system. Squeeze one open, and a burst of color appears. Relax it, and the color vanishes. Layer thousands of these together, and an octopus can shift its entire skin pattern in under a second. Underneath that layer sit muscles that can reshape the octopus's actual body texture, smoothing it flat or raising it into spiky ridges to match rock, sand, or coral. Most octopuses use this purely for blending in. But one species does something stranger. It uses this same toolkit not to disappear, but to become someone else entirely. This is the mimic octopus, first formally described by biologist Mark Norman in 1998, off the coast of Sulawesi, Indonesia. And what Norman documented was not just color matching, it was full-body performance. Here is where the escalation begins, because the mimic octopus does not have just one disguise, it has an entire repertoire. Stage 1. Flatten your body, spread your arms into a single wide ribbon, and undulate slowly across open sand. To a predator above, this reads instantly as a venomous soul, a flatfish few animals want to mess with. The octopus is not simply the same color as a soul, it is moving with the same rippling motion, at the same speed, tracing the same silhouette. This is not disguise, it is acting. Stage 2, and the stakes climb higher. Tuck 6 arms into a burrow, extend the 2 remaining arms straight out in opposite directions, and pulse them with alternating black and white bands. From a distance, this reads as something almost every reef predator avoids without hesitation. A banded sea snake, one of the most venomous animals in the ocean. The octopus cannot inject venom of its own. It has no fangs, no toxin delivery system for this trick. Its entire defense is theater, built entirely on convincing a predator that a fight is not worth having. Stage 3 pushes the transformation even further. Splay all 8 arms outward, puff the body slightly, and drift with the current. This posture has been documented resembling a lionfish, an animal covered in venomous spines that predators learn to avoid early and permanently. Again, no spines, no venom, just shape, just posture, just enough visual information to trigger the same avoidance response a real lionfish would trigger. And here is the detail that turns this from an interesting animal fact into something genuinely startling. Researchers studying the mimic octopus, including cephalopod behavioral ecologist Christine Haffard, observed something remarkable in the field. The octopus does not perform the same disguise every time. It appears to select which impersonation to use based on which predator is nearby. Encounter a damselfish that specifically preys on small crabs, and the octopus is more likely to switch into the banded sea snake display, since sea snakes are known predators of that exact damselfish. In other words, this is not a random costume box. It looks like a targeted response, matched to the specific threat in front of it. Think about what that requires. It requires recognizing a threat. It requires selecting, from a mental library of postures, the one specific disguise most likely to intimidate that threat. And it requires executing a full-body performance fast enough to matter in a life-or-death encounter that often unfolds in seconds. This is not a fixed defense mechanism, like a pufferfish inflating the same way every single time. This looks like flexible, situational decision-making in an animal with a brain wired almost nothing like ours. Before we get to the science reveal, it is worth pausing on just how physically demanding this performance actually is. Picture the animal for a moment. In its resting state, the mimic octopus is a fairly unremarkable brown and white creature, roughly the length of a human forearm, soft-bodied, boneless, with no armor and no speed advantage over most reef predators. It cannot outswim a hunting fish. It cannot outmuscle anything larger than itself. Every single one of its defenses lives entirely in behavior, not biology. That is an enormous gamble to build a survival strategy around. One miscalculated performance, one predator that is not fooled, and there is no backup plan. No shell to retreat into, no spines to fall back on. Just theater, performed under maximum pressure, every single time. And the theater has to be fast. Reef encounters do not unfold in slow motion. A hunting fish investigating a strange shape on the sand might commit to an attack within a second or two of deciding something looks vulnerable. That means the mimic octopus does not have time to experiment. It has to recognize the shape of the threat approaching, retrieve the correct disguise, and physically reconfigure its entire body, texture, color, and posture, all inside a window shorter than it takes to read this sentence aloud. Get the posture slightly wrong, hold an arm at the wrong angle, or delay the color shift by even a moment, and the illusion collapses exactly when it matters most. This is also why researchers describe the behavior as remarkable rather than simply clever. Plenty of animals bluff. Plenty puff up, flash a startling color, or fake a lunge. But those are largely fixed responses. The same reflex triggered the same way every time, regardless of what is actually approaching. What field observations of the mimic octopus suggest is something closer to a live judgment call, made under duress, with the wrong choice carrying a fatal cost. Now for the science reveal, because this is where things get genuinely strange, in a good way. Octopuses do not have a single centralized brain the way vertebrates do. Roughly 2/3 of an octopus's neurons live outside its central brain, distributed through its 8 arms. Each arm can process sensory information and initiate movement with a striking degree of independence, almost like 8 semi-autonomous problem solvers attached to one central coordinator. Marine biologist Roger Hanlon, one of the leading researchers on cephalopod camouflage at the Marine Biological Laboratory, has spent decades documenting how this distributed nervous system allows octopuses to execute camouflage changes with a speed and precision that outpaces almost anything else in the animal kingdom. For the mimic octopus specifically, this means coordinating up to 8 limbs into a single unified silhouette, while simultaneously firing the correct skin pattern, all in response to a threat that might be circling for only a few seconds. There is a deeper layer to this distributed system worth understanding, because it changes how we should think about what deciding even means for an animal like this. In a vertebrate, a decision typically originates in the brain and travels outward through nerves to the muscles that carry it out. In an octopus, a significant portion of that decision-making appears to happen much closer to the muscles themselves. An arm exploring a crevice can respond to what it touches without waiting for instructions to travel all the way to the central brain and back. Scientists studying cephalopod neurology describe this as a kind of semi-independent processing, each arm carrying enough of its own neural circuitry to react locally, while the central brain focuses more on overall coordination and strategic choices, like which disguise to commit to. For the mimic octopus, this division of labor may be exactly what makes rapid, whole-body impersonation possible in the first place. Instead of one overworked control center trying to micromanage 8 limbs during a life-threatening encounter, the work is shared, each arm doing its part of the performance almost simultaneously rather than sequentially. Here is the twist worth sitting with. The mimic octopus was not identified by science until relatively recently, in the late 1990s, despite living in shallow, frequently dived reef systems. For decades, it was almost certainly seen by divers, and simply mistaken for the animals it was imitating. That means one of the ocean's most sophisticated behavioral performers spent years hiding in plain sight, not because it was rare, but because its disguise worked exactly as intended, even on the species specifically trained to notice unusual animals. So could an octopus really impersonate any animal in the ocean? Not literally any animal, and not through some limitless shape-shifting ability. The truth is narrower and, honestly, more impressive. The mimic octopus appears to draw from a small, specific set of dangerous local animals, likely learned or refined through experience in its own reef environment, then deploys the most threat-appropriate one at exactly the right moment. It is not magic. It is targeted, situational performance, built on a nervous system so decentralized that its own arms are, in a sense, thinking along with it. Here is the modern mirror, the part of this that says something about more than just an octopus. We tend to imagine intelligence as a single command center directing a body from the top down, one brain, calling every shot. The mimic octopus suggests a different possibility. That real-time problem-solving, the kind that has to happen fast, under pressure, with incomplete information, might not require one central authority making every decision. It might work better as a distributed system. Information and initiative spread outward, each part capable of contributing to the whole in the moment that matters most. There is something almost humbling in that. An animal with no bones, no vocal cords, and a nervous system radically unlike our own has developed one of the most sophisticated threat response strategies documented in nature, not through raw power, but through observation, selection, and precisely timed performance. It does not overpower its predators. It outthinks them, one perfectly chosen disguise at a time. It also reframes what we mean by a dangerous predator in the first place. We tend to measure threat by weaponry, teeth, venom, claws, speed. The mimic octopus carries none of those, yet it has thrived for likely millions of years on reefs crowded with animals that could kill it in seconds. Its advantage was never physical. It was informational. It learned what its neighbors feared, and then it became that fear on command. In a habitat as competitive and unforgiving as a coral reef, that kind of behavioral flexibility may be worth more than any single weapon could ever be. So the next time you imagine the ocean's most dangerous predators, do not just picture teeth, speed, or venom. Somewhere down there, something without any of those advantages is quietly watching its predators, reading the threat, and deciding, arm by arm, exactly who to become next.